Welcome to the School of Laughs podcast, brought to you by schooloflaughs.com. Whether you're an aspiring comedian, a part-time pro, or a speaker who wants to become funnier, this is the podcast for you. We'll break down tools, tips, and techniques to help you get bigger, better, and more bookable. And now, here's the show.
Welcome to the podcast. Rick Roberts here. Man, I've got a good one today. It was really fun to catch up with Thor Ramsey. Thor, if you don't know, Christian comedian who produced this film called Church People that came out this year, which is really good, and it's about to be released digitally and on DVD in September. So I thought it was a good time to catch him and catch up with him and find out a little bit about not only the movie, which we definitely talk about. We talk about, the tone he was trying to write it with and what it takes to put a movie into the church market, the different types of movies that go in there. But we talk about how he got started in comedy and how we first met through a show called Bananas, which was shot in Columbus, Ohio, my old stomping grounds, and how that was actually an answer to a prayer that I prayed. He didn't know the story, so I caught him up on that at the beginning. We talked a little bit about his comedy career, and then we get into the movie. So if you just want to hear about the movie stuff, you can shoot about halfway through it. But if you want to hear about Thor and kind of see his framework for getting to the point where he wrote the movie, I think the whole thing's worth listening to. So we'll jump in literally 10 seconds. I want to say a shout out to Rhonda Corey, a Patreon sponsor for this episode, and her show, Talk is Cheap, which you can find on Facebook, is about to hit 100 episodes. So Rhonda, congratulations on doing that. As a guy who's put out almost 250 podcasts, I know that it's a lot of work, but I know you have fun doing it, and it's a fun thing to watch and listen. So if you haven't checked out the Talk is Cheap video program she does on Facebook, you got to check it out. Go ahead and search that, friend her, and get in there and watch it. Now let's get into this fun interview with Thor Ramsey. Well, Thor Ramsey, thanks for joining me today on the podcast. How are things going, sir?
Good. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was excited. About a month ago or so, I got to watch the Church People movie, and we'll definitely dig into that today. And I thought you did a great job. And I know,
thanks, man.
Gosh, none of that is easy. So we'll talk about the process and all that stuff a little bit. And also that it's going to be coming out in September for people to download digitally or get the DVD and stuff, which I'm excited about.
September 3rd. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me how many people still want a DVD of things. It's part of that hoarder culture that we have. Like, I wanted my hands on it, but I'm kind of like that too. So I'm looking forward to that coming out.
Yeah, I'm surprised at the DVDs myself. So I don't even take them to shows with me anymore.
Yeah, I know. I give them away, and people still leave them on the table. Well, for people that have listened to my podcast for a while, they know I do clean comedy. I'm a Christian. But really, I want to say this up front before I forget about it. One of the big things that helped me kind of make that decision to stay clean was when we did Bananas. And I can never remember the year that was, but that was 3 or 4 years that you were doing that. Is that correct?
We did. We actually did 3.5 seasons, and they didn't. We almost did the 4th season. For some reason, they didn't finish the 4th season. I think the economy dropped out and they just didn't finish. But I think we did 3 full seasons.
Yeah. And it's funny. I had just moved from Columbus, Ohio down to Nashville. And I always think sometimes we don't know how things happen. So this is how I got to do Bananas. Somebody got sick and they needed to find somebody to fill in like in 2 weeks notice. So I was happy to do that.
Well, that's funny. I wonder who got sick. I wonder who that was, huh?
Yeah. I'd have to go back and see if, who that was. But anyway, I had just finished up like 2 weeks of these one-nighters where I was still doing some bar gigs and doing some clubs Tuesday through Saturday and picking up all these other gigs. And I was exhausted. And I just moved to Nashville, and I was probably between Bowling Green and Nashville. And I really had reached a point where I was like, I'm tired of doing this. And I pulled over. I remember pulling over on the side of the road and praying for like 5 minutes. Like, God, I think I'm funny, and I think that's what I'm supposed to be doing, but it doesn't seem like there's much in it for the audience, for me, and I'm up for it. But what's the next step? I had no idea.
Oh, so you were thinking about even going some other direction?
Yes,
leaving comedy.
Well, either leaving comedy completely, if maybe these speaking skills prepared me for something in ministry or whatever, I didn't know.
Right.
And I did the classic, send me a sign and help me be bright enough to see it and not just think it's another,
Right.
5-6 minutes later after that, I get a phone call from Lenny Sisselman who says, "Hey, can you do a clean hour? They're looking for somebody to do a Christian comedy taping up in Columbus, Ohio." And I'm like, "What?" That's the fastest answer to any prayer. And it's exactly what I was praying for. So I went up there, met you, did the show, and then through that, learned about the Christian Comedy Association and joined them. And you never know how things get started. So I didn't know if you knew that story at all. So I thought I'd throw that in there.
I didn't.
Yeah.
Well, that's great to hear, man.
Yeah. Well, I just think you never know how you influence people and how your deeds are affecting other people. So it definitely affected me, whether I knew it at the time or not, what it was going to lead to. And I've been connected to a lot of cool people from trickled down from that effect. So so that was very cool, and I enjoyed the taping, and it gave me kind of an insight into how some of these filming things work and how you run a show and the early mornings. You know, you do a lot leading up to it, but I just remember hitting the radio early in the day, and we did some vignettes. We went to I got a bit about the engagement ring, so we went to a jewelry store and did some guitar stuff, and just how the whole thing flowed really, really smoothly. And I think you're probably in the second or third season at that point, so you had it kind of working. What was the impetus to get that going in the first place, and how did Columbus, Ohio, end up being the spot?
Oh, for Bananas?
Yeah.
Well, that's where the production company, which I think was
Guardian Studios.
Guardian, yeah, they had a production company, and they had their own. They actually had their own network there, and so they were looking to produce original content. And man, it's been so many years. I'm trying to think of the poor guy's name right now, but he's a really good guy. Anyway, he came out to the Christian Comedy Association conference, I guess you'd call it, when we were in Nashville. We had it in probably Franklin, I imagine, probably at Shonda Pierce's church, if I remember correctly. But he came out to that and stayed for the conference and approached me after the conference and just said, "Hey, we're thinking about starting this comedy program called Bananas." And I actually tried to get them to change the name.
Yeah. What would you have chosen?
Pure Comedy was going to. Pure Comedy was but they were stuck on the tag, appealing comedy for the whole family. So, and in hindsight, you struggle against this stuff, but in hindsight, I should have just embraced the entire Bananas mindset. It would have been a better career move than fighting against it. I tell you that. So, but that was really the impetus of it and they even offered to put my name in the title. Bananas with Thor Ramsey was going to be the title. But because I was so embarrassed of the name Bananas, I told them not to. And now in hindsight, there's no such thing as bad publicity. So that was really a dumb move to pull my name out of there. But so that's really what, I just, ended up having meetings with them. And I ended up, one of the things I ended up doing is really, in one sense, giving them comedians to book because they had certain, acts. And then they had, believe it or not, they had turned down Bob Nelson.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, what? But he's had 2 HBO specials. Why would you turn down Bob Nelson? And well, there was one bit that he did that they felt was just a little over the top. Like, well, just ask him not to do that.
Right.
It's that simple. So they're like, okay. And so they ended up rebooking Bob, and he became, I think the first season, he was one of the top, out of all the comedians they had that year, Bob was one of the top 1 or 2 most watched or most bought videos. And so anyway, so that was the minor influence I had behind the scenes there. But
I was curious about that too, because I know after second or third season, I mean, the first one you're like, oh, I got all these comedy buddies. I've seen them do an hour clean. I've got no problem with it. And then the second season, probably same. And then the third season, like, I mean, a guy like me, you didn't know, and I'm coming in, and I think we only had to take one thing out of my whole set that I had slipped up and kind of did a joke that I thought, a little reference I didn't need to do. But you're looking at these outsiders coming in. As a host, did you care a lot? Because they had to do the editing and all that stuff. Or were you curious? Like, how are some of these non-Christian or publicized
No,
Christian
most of the
comedian.
non-Christian guys I was at least vaguely familiar with, because you didn't want to bring someone in and go, oh, that was just there was no way they could do a clean set. You had to know their act,
Right.
at least had to see the video or something of them. So we had a few guys that came in that were just clean. But Bananas itself, really, that's what it was. It wasn't necessarily this is all Christian comedy, though most Christians work, most you'd hope,
Yeah.
Christians work clean. But we brought in a lot of guys that were just guys that could work clean, because that was the whole purpose of the show. It was just comedy for the whole family.
Yeah.
And really, again, I wish I would have embraced it more, but kids loved that program. Kids loved it. And I even now, so I just did a music festival on Saturday in a Life Fest in Wisconsin.
Oh, yeah.
And had this kid come up to me and he was like, I started watching you when I was 4, but it was all Bananas.
Yeah, they did.
It's like, but because he had experience with it as a kid, I think a lot of times we don't realize it's actually more impactful when you're a kid and you see something like that. They're actually, if there were only more kids like that, but they're actually bigger fans than people who experienced it who were older.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
that
so
age, they get into it. We're doing VBS at my church this week, and I'm home, so I'm like, I'll volunteer to be the guy that does a sketch at the beginning.
Oh, that's funny.
And so yesterday, as soon as I got into it, and I'm the guy that's clueless, and I'm trying to learn the lesson for the week. And this kid just came right to the stage and goes, "You just don't get it, man." And then, and I'm just thinking, this kid got it on the very first day.
The little kid said that to you?
Yeah. And so our theme is like treasured. So they're all the treasure, and I'm a treasure hunter. And he's like, "You don't get it, man. We're treasure. You're treasure." Like, he learned that from the first 3-minute pre-roll video.
Oh,
and so
funny.
Today when I come in, he's like, "What don't you understand today, dude?" Like, he came right to the stage. I'm like, but you're right. They soak it in. They get it. I mean, when I was a kid, any kind of comedy thing that made me laugh, I still remember watching these early sketches on TV. Bob Hope had the special. You mentioned Bob Nelson. I remember Bob Nelson from the Bob Hope specials that he would do.
Yeah. Well, I remember, like one of my, I think most, at least from my generation, like Jerry Lewis. We loved Jerry Lewis movies just because he was so physical. Yeah. So there was something about, and cable wasn't as, we didn't have cable when I was a kid. So we didn't get there was no way to just see every Jerry Lewis movie that we wanted to. It was a rare occasion when we got to see a Jerry Lewis movie. So it was a big deal. Yeah. And even Don Knotts, I remember, The Incredible Mr. Limpet. If people know that movie where he falls into the ocean, becomes a fish, which turns into kind of it was like a combination of animation and, live action, but Don Knotts right up your alley there.
Oh yeah. I loved all that stuff early on. The Apple Dumpling Gang rides again and all that kind of stuff. So
Tim Conway and all those guys. Yeah.
All those great comedic actors. Carol Burnett's show was big when I was a kid. And just I always loved the show business aspect of it. I always loved comedy. Had no idea I was headed there, down the pike, or else maybe I'd have paid a little bit more attention early on. But
The Ghost and Mr. Chicken, that was a big one.
Oh, real big one. I've got a big painting right over here with that on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for you, the one thing I didn't really think about till today, even though we did Bananas a long time ago and I've seen you do comedy here and there and all kinds of stuff, I never knew where you started or how you got your start. Did you do comedy clubs for a while, then find the Christian?
Yeah, almost a decade probably, right in there. And then I wasn't walking with the Lord at that point, basically, long story short, but got married and needed help, called out to God, and that kind of led me back into, led us back to church, which then actually I got my start with the Prison Fellowship.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Do you know Steve Geyer?
I know of him. Don't know him.
Okay. So I went to a Christian music festival, and I only went to the music festival to see, because they had Steve Geyer there. So I went to see Steve Geyer. He was the first, other than Mike Warnke, who wasn't performing at that time, I don't think, but because Mike Warnke was the only Christian comedian I'd ever seen or heard of. And I saw Mike 2 or 3 times live back in the day. But Steve Geyer was the first stand-up, the guy that actually did clubs before and then did the church that I saw. And I talked to him after the event. And told him my background and stuff. He says, let me give you a number. He gave, so I basically, through Steve Geyer, called Prison Fellowship. And it was in Prison Fellowship that I actually started doing comedy for the first time around, it was like for Christian purposes. I'll say that. It wasn't necessarily a Christian audience,
right?
Because it was in prisons. But and then I found like there's Christian events. I mean, I knew there were music festivals, but I didn't know you just did events at churches. So that kind of opened up that avenue. And then I, started getting booked in churches, and that kind of led into, and then Christian comedy is much more conducive to staying married and having a family, because when you did clubs, you were literally gone. Well, you could be gone every day of the week but one.
Yeah.
You'd work Tuesday through Sunday back in the heyday.
Yeah.
And so generally you'd use Monday for travel. So you could literally not be home ever. Yeah. And then Christian world, you're really only gone Friday or Saturday or both. And then you're home the rest of the week. So it was great. And the pay was better, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
so it was much more family friendly in every way.
Right. Yeah. I kind of found the same thing once really about 2 weeks after I did the bananas thing. I'm like, you know what? I would be ashamed if somebody came to see me because they saw me on this and saw me doing anything else, risque or whatever in the clubs. I would really feel like I let them down.
Right.
And the more I cleaned it up, even in the clubs, then it offered me better positions and more opportunities. All the clubs started throwing me all their corporate gigs and stuff. And through that, I learned that there was, just other opportunities out there. I didn't really understand how clean I was when I wasn't even trying to be clean. And I cleaned it up a little bit more. I'm like, oh man, that's, I tell people I'm too clean probably for you. So you might want to find somebody else. And if they get that, then I'm all right. But yeah, it does lead to a better life and a more sustainable family for sure. I always feel bad for the guys. And you saw them too when you were doing the clubs, the headliners that were past their prime and not enjoying it and taking up space for other comedians who might be on the rise. And then they're just complaining about everything. And they're not home. They're not a good husband, not a good
And there was
father.
a sadness to it. You'd meet guys like, so when you're, we were in our, I was in my 20s when I started stand up, late 20s. I'm not going to tell you when, but I was in my late 20s. And then, within, I was working the road full time within a year of starting. This is back when there was a comedy boom. Right. It was like the housing market. I got in at just the right time before the market crashed, and I was working 42 weeks a year. And I just, every year I was working at least 42 weeks a year for the next 7 years. And then you'd meet guys, then you're in your early 30s even. You're meeting guys who are in their 50s, and you just go, wow, do I want that to be me when I'm 50?
Yeah.
Because there was a sadness to their lives because it was just basically, and then you'd meet guys, they were really only stand-ups because of the lifestyle, not because they loved stand-up. It was a place where they could work 1 hour a day, where they could loaf and drink. And that was really the key to the stand-up for them. Whereas, like here, I thought everyone loved stand-up the way I did, that had a passion for it, that, not that I didn't make mistakes along the way and could have done things differently, but the one thing I never regretted doing was actually doing stand-up, but you're just going, is that the life I want?
I know. Yeah. If that's what's coming down the pike, I better get off the pike. Head a different direction.
Yeah.
Well, you've done a lot of things, obviously, stand up. You've written books, 2 or 3 books that I know of.
Yeah. I've got a novel that just got accepted. So that'll be coming out in the next, they say it's going to take 9 months, which I'm a little disappointed because I'm like, don't you just have a printer and paper? I mean, you got the manuscript now. Can you just, run some copies? But apparently there's a whole process. But so that should be coming out in the next 9 months or so. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. So of all the things that you got your hands in, they're all equally rewarding in different ways, but is the novel the thing you're most fired up about now?
Well, no, the film's still. I've written 10 full-length screenplays now. And it's one of those things where you're going, and 10's really not, I really feel like I need to get to 20 because just at 10, the one I'm working on now with Brad Stein are actually working on one together called The Revenge of Adam and Eve. And I really feel like number 10 there was just something different about number 10 that I felt like I had the system down in terms of the structure of the storyline and everything like that, of how screenplays should go. And there was just something about number 10 that clicked. It's almost like in stand-up, as you're beginning, you have no idea why people laugh at certain things. And then after you do stand-up for so long, it's like you have this joke that you might have been doing from the beginning and you don't know why people are laughing at it. But after you do stand-up for 5 years, you're like, I get why they're laughing at that now.
Right.
Because you understand the structure and the setups and there's just the technique and the structure are really vital to when you're crafting anything. You have to have the funny stuff in there. And I think there's most stand-ups have a sense of why people laugh at them. But here's the thing. If you have a funny person who doesn't understand why people laugh at them, they could never really become a stand-up. Because you have to take that everyday funniness that, you have people who they make people laugh in their everyday lives, but stand-up is about taking that to the stage. And there's a structure and an analysis to do that. So, you've got to understand that to actually do stand-up. So,
right.
And it's this, screenwriting in the sense there's a structure to it. Now it's always about, somebody said that, I don't know who said the whole idea that there are probably only, 5 stories or 10 stories people just keep retelling. I don't know how many it is, but I get that. I mean, boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl. That's the standard romantic type of screenplay, and all screenplays have a structure, but it's just finding creative ways to retell those stories. Right. So that's really what it is. But you got to know the structure to do it.
So early on in those first 9, what were some of the mistakes that, as a guy who's written 10 now, go, oh, that would have made a big difference going back and saved a lot of time and helped the story?
Yeah, it's about beats. To me, right now, I feel like that's the biggest mistake. And what I mean by that is there's a great resource, if you get a lot of people who are creatives listening to this, called Story Grid. If you're interested in screenwriting or novels, I use it for both. But Story Grid is one of the best things I've read lately regarding the storytelling process. Because one of the biggest things in the 2 big things it brings to you is you have to understand the genre you're writing for. I write for the Christian market. So Christian films are a genre. And every genre comes with expectations. For instance, murder mysteries, that's a genre. So what do you need in a murder mystery? You've got to have a dead body. Somebody has to be murdered. There has to be a mystery to it. If you don't have a dead body, you're messing up your genre. But the point they make in the Story Grid is that every genre comes with expectations. And if you go, well, I want to write something out of the box, and it's like, you can be creative, but if you do not hit the beats that people are expecting from your genre, they will feel disappointed. Mm-hmm. And so that's why when people, it's not my debate, but people that I differ in my viewpoint of Christian film, people say, well, like they'll say Up, the movie, the Pixar movie Up, that had redemptive themes, et cetera, so they could classify that as a Christian film. I'm going, you can't classify it as a Christian film, because Christian film is a genre and it comes with expectations. And one of those expectations people that go to see Christian films have is to see a Christian character who is patently, cornily evangelical Christian in their viewpoint. The entire film is that. Now I think, again, how you do that is the question. I think Christian films have, for all the flack they take, I think they've really come a long way in the last decade. People say, well, Christians make a lot of bad films. Like, no one's denying that. So does a secular market. As a matter of fact, they make more bad films because there's more of them. They make more films and there's more bad films. So we make less films. Yeah, there's some bad films, but we've come a long way in the last decade. The point being, though, that Christian films are a genre, so they have to hit certain points. Now, I think the the issue for me in the Christian film industry, or the Christian film market, so to speak, is I have one box I'm trying to check in my films, and that is fun. I want them to be fun. I want them to be entertaining, and that's the box I'm trying to check. I don't try to force the message in. I know, and I know guys, and I like some of these guys I know personally, some I don't, and some are great folks, and that's not the issue. It's just, but I don't want my films to basically be a 3-point sermon. And some people do that, and I think there's a place for that, and that's fine. Those are not the films I'm looking to make. I feel like with church people, I feel like we didn't have to shoehorn the message in, because it was dealing with the church culture, and it was dealing with the issue of the gospel itself. So the message was just built into the film itself, and we didn't have to force it in anywhere. So it's there. I think that the film does have a message, and I think it's a strong message, but I didn't feel like we had to force it in. Right. It's just there. And I think, to me, that's even the film that Brad and I or the script that Brad and I are working on, The Revenge of Adam and Eve, because it's dealing with Adam and Eve and the sanctity of marriage, it's just built in. Yeah. We don't have to shoehorn it in there. We know the theme. And even so, my friends that I've been friends with these guys for over 20 years, Darren Streblow, Bone Hampton, and Leland Clausen. We've been friends for over 20 years. Stand-ups, always, we're all Christian stand-ups. So first of the year, with all the Zoom stuff going, I said, why don't we write a screenplay together? And so long story short, we ended up, I think it took us about 3 months. We met once a week, spent about 3 or 4 hours together on Zoom. And we wrote a screenplay together. And and our focus was to really just write a family screwball comedy. Mm-hmm. And now we have, and I think Darren said this, let's see what theme emerges. And because, we wrote it for ourselves, so all 4 of us, if we get it produced, we'll play in it, we'll star in it together. So we're in every scene together. And oddly enough, the theme that emerges is friendship. Yeah. So we didn't have to shoehorn it in. It emerges, so we emphasize it. But again, it's really just a funny comedy, and it has a little point to make, but because, and I think when you take when the setting itself deals with the Christian subculture, then your message is built in. You don't have to force it in there, and you can just emphasize it at certain points. But I don't know what that got me on, but anyway. No, that leads. I think the big point was what have I learned? But I think the beats, and I didn't even finish answering your question, believe it or not. So I do want to answer this though. And initially, when I would write a screenplay, what you have is, if you have too many similar beats, if you begin the scene positively and end negatively, and the next scene begins positively and ends negatively, and you do that several times in a row, if you ever have someone read your screenplay and say, this segment seemed flat, what they're really saying is it was the same. And that's what the story grid really helps you analyze each scene. What's the point of this scene? And if your last scene ended up positive and ended up negative, then maybe start this one negative, end up positive, and then have a positive or a negative. But have your scenes vary enough in their emotional content from beginning to end, where you're taking people, again, on this up and down journey, rather than just, if you do positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, they might not be able to express it. But what they're going to feel is same. And that's what people mean when they say it feels flat. So I think that's the biggest thing, or the biggest thing I've learned writing 10 screenplays now is analyzing each scene and going, okay, how's the flow going? Did that last one end up, make sure I'm varying it enough.
Right. Yeah. Because especially Christian films, but every film is usually about a character transformation. They go from this point to this point, and not in real life. In any case, do we start it in a positive situation? And not every phone call starts that way. No transformation is going to start that. There's going to be parts where you think you got it, and then boom, somebody knocks you right back down to square one, and a new character comes in to kind of take you to the next level. There's all those little things that are in there. So Story Grid sounds like something that's definitely worth checking out.
It's really good. So my manager at the time, back when I had a career I cared about, got me a meeting with Sony Affirm. And this guy's still over there, a guy named Josh Nadler. Great guy, but so I basically, I pitched them this idea. They wanted to see it. So I hadn't finished the script at the time. I didn't tell them that, but I went home and finished the script and I sent it off to Josh and he called me up and he gave me notes on it. Now, I don't know if this is standard. I don't think it is, but he did this 5 times. It's like I do a rewrite, send it to him. He'd call me up, give me notes on the phone. And it was like, what a great guy. And so the last time he did this, he said, what your story needs right now is a big idea to bring all the characters together. I was like, wow, okay, a big idea. I'm not sure what I'm looking for. Just it's a big idea. So I just had my antennas up. And a friend of mine who was a church planter, he's one of my best friends at the time, he called me up and he said, you're not going to believe what this megachurch that we've all heard of is doing for Good Friday. I'm like, well, what are they doing? Because they're actually crucifying someone. Like, there's no way. Because I'm looking at their social media right now. So I go check out their social media page. Well, what happened is that they weren't actually crucifying someone, but they were having a passion play, but it was going to be so realistic that they had all kinds of warnings about the blood and if you're squeamish and etc. But what occurred to me is that because so many American pastors had done such crazy things to attract people to church in the evangelical church culture, that for a second, my friend and I actually believed that an American evangelical church would actually crucify someone on a Good Friday. And I'm like, there's my big idea. And because it's satirical in nature, and that's really what, was a comedy. So we really started dealing with that idea. And it was coinciding with what I was learning about the gospel itself. So it was really coinciding with my viewpoint because as I grew in my understanding of the gospel, it saved my Christian life. I will say that. Because I came from a perspective theologically where I thought you could lose your salvation. And I fell away for a decade with that theology. And when I came back, it's like really, it was a renewal of learning what the gospel itself was and who Christ was, what he actually did, and learning what a horrible theology that is, not just because you can lose your salvation, but what it says about Christ,
right?
Which says he's not enough. His blood was not enough. You got to help him out. So you got to bring your own works, your own righteousness. You got to bring all that to the table to help Jesus out to save you. And that's really what that theology does. It's a horrible theology because it says Jesus is not enough. But bringing all that to the table, that's really what we were dealing with. The theme was, is the gospel enough? Mm-hmm. And that's really what we were dealing with in the screenplay. So in one sense, it is a comedy, but again, it's satirical. But I tell people this all the time. You can only satirize what you love. I love Jesus. I love the church. So it doesn't come across as mean. Because whenever you see a movie satire, and they don't love their subject matter, it feels mean.
Yeah.
Because it generally is. Right. So you can see it. That's why, and I've seen, like there was a movie advertised just this last year. I can't remember the name of it, but it was dealing with the Christian subculture. But I'm going, I don't think these people who made this were Christians, because even the previews look mean. It doesn't look like, we love the church and we're just trying to get across the message the church could, should consider. It was making fun in a way that wasn't redemptive at all.
Right.
So
the pastor at this church where you shot the film.
The guy was an
apprehensive.
Actor.
Oh, okay.
So I never met the actual pastor of the big church that we shot at, because we shot at a mega church. Mm-hmm. I don't even know if they read the script. They just allowed us to shoot there. But I know that initially they were screening it. Like Stephen Baldwin was screening it to some megachurch pastors that he knew. Mm-hmm. Being Stephen Baldwin, he's going to know some people, and he does. But it was interesting. Some of the feedback we were receiving is they felt like we were making fun of them.
Right.
I go, so we weren't really making fun of them, but we were in one sense. I go, in one sense, there is I saw it as good in the sense that the message was getting across.
Yeah. Well, you can always say we're not making fun of you. We're making fun of people that have a church the size of you that don't get it. And then they're like, oh, maybe we don't get it. Right.
That's exactly it. And so that was a little bit of the feedback initially. And so, and I think maybe that's why it took a little while to get it released, actually. So I don't know if that was why, but I did find that interesting that some people, because, like it's about a megachurch and there's redemption in that megachurch. So we've never been against megachurch. I'm not against megachurches, but I do think, and the movie really doesn't deal with this issue, but it kind of plays into it subtly. But in terms of the issue with the overall church today, and I've really grown in this myself in the last several years. But let's say there are only 400. Well, there are about 400,000 churches in America. Now, let's say only half of those believe the Bible, and I think that's even being generous. So let's say 200,000 actually believe the Bible and preach the Bible. So you got 200,000 churches in America that believe the Bible. Only 1,000 of those are megachurches. So that leaves 199,000 churches where the average church size is 50 to 100 people, give or take.
Yeah.
But the problem is the mentality of the megachurch dominates all the thinking for all the churches. And every church feels like they have to grow into a megachurch when they're not the norm. The norm is, if you're going to a church and there's 50 people, that's normal. That's actually normal. And statistically, a church, 10 churches of 100 people actually bear more fruit than one church of 1,000. That's just statistically proven. So the issue I have is that we make what's not normative, the megachurch, the norm. And we all think we have to grow into that. And I go, that's really damaging to the body of Christ, because it makes every small church feel like they have to do things differently to compete with the big megachurches. Even the people in the pews, they're going, we're only 50 people. We've been going for 3 years. Clearly, we're not advancing clearly at the rate we should. I mean, but it truly affects everyone in the body of Christ when just going, God decides. You want to try to reach people. You want to plant the seeds, preach the gospel. God decides whether you're going to reach 10 or 1,000. That's up to him. That's just a biblical principle. So our goal, again, is, we want to do everything the Bible tells us to do, preach faithfully, try to reach people, we want to be attractive. That's the whole thing. I'm not against the attractional church, but again, there is a tendency of mega churches, because they're trying to appeal to such a wide body, to not address certain issues. I go, That's not biblical. You can't, but there are big mega churches that do it right,
Yeah. I mean,
Matt Chandler's a mega church. I don't really think Matt Chandler, I haven't listened to Matt quite a few years now, but back in the day when, Matt was more influential in my life, but I'd listened to Matt, and I never thought Matt was, holding back anywhere. So I think there are mega churches that preach the truth and get it right. So it's not the issue of the mega church, but my issue is that mentality shouldn't dominate the whole church.
Right. And I see that too with a lot of churches that I've attended or been to, where they're afraid to scare anybody off because they're trying to get the numbers up. And so it's always, they approach it as, we're going to introduce you to Jesus, and then the rest is up to you in your small group. And small groups are important.
Yeah.
But, if you're only getting, and let's face it, not everybody goes to a small group. So if they're just showing up on Sunday for an hour and 40 minutes of that is preaching all on the surface level of let's be better people and just very surface stuff, it's not getting deep. So I'm with you, a small church that goes, it's not really how many people are in the church, it's how much of the church is in you day to day when you walk out of there and you put it into the community. So
that's a good way to put it.
100 people that are doing things and trying to do things the right way and learning and developing the relationship with Christ, that's way better than 10,000 where 60 of them are,
Right.
So we're on the same page with that. I think too, there's an interesting thing today with, it has seeped into every thing, whether it's a performance, a TV show, a movie, is, and I know you speak on it sometimes, the cancel culture that's out there and how it's affecting people before they do an action. Some who are overly sensitive to being taken out of context or whatever.
Right.
And so it's watering down pre-message what the message is in some aspects. I get a lot of questions on this on the comedy side of things from my listeners too, is how do you stay true to what you believe and what you want to get across and deal with that, whether you're going to know you're going to get it or if you're trying to avoid it a little bit. What's,
well,
no right answer.
Yeah. I think a big thing is understanding the culture. You got to understand the cultural waters we're living in. And I don't think we understand that very well. The book I recommend to people, it's not an easy book to get through, but if you listen to it on audio, listen to it a few times. But there's a book by Carl Trueman, who I think is I thought he was at Westminster Seminary in Philadelphia. Don't quote me on that, but he used to be. Wherever he's at now, he's a great thinker, and he wrote a book called "The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self." So it's not an easy title, it's not an easy book, because it's the rise and triumph of the modern self, and he tells us, he really traces in a really kind of a broad overall viewpoint of how we arrived in a society where we can now say, "I'm a man trapped in a woman's body," and it's not a Monty Python joke anymore. It's literally everyone takes it seriously. And if you don't take that seriously, then there's something wrong with your thinking, is really what it is. But he traces, like, you don't get here overnight. You don't get here in the last 5 years. You didn't get here just because of the 2015 Obergefell decision. We got here over a period of several hundred years, and the thinkers that ended up influencing how our culture thinks as a whole. And that's really important to understand the waters we're swimming in now. And I think it helps us be better communicators, but at least it helps us understand why there are people now who don't think, the restriction of freedom of speech is a bad thing. It's like, I grew up in I was a grade schooler during the 60s. So I witnessed campus riots and stuff back then, but the whole emphasis back then was let us speak. Don't censor us. And now it's just the opposite on campus. Shut these people up. So you're going, how do you get from there to here? So, but this book really helps us understand what he calls the social imaginary, which is the idea that our culture itself it's how people imagine how things are, the imagination of the culture out there and how generally people are thinking. And it shows us how we got here. And the church isn't, we're not alone. It's like we're not, we're having our minds renewed by Scripture, but we're still a product of the times we're living in. So it even affects us. So I think that's a good place to start in understanding the times we're in, because it's pretty disheartening sometimes. I think now as a Christian, that there are just certainly what we would consider self-evident truths that are just not evident to people.
Right. And I think
there are at least people in denial of them because of the way culture's moving and thinking.
Yeah. And, I've really noticed this over the past couple of years, and now it's like too late for me to notice it, but I'm glad I finally kind of realized it, is that a lot of times what people consider to be a small battle, I'm like, hey, just let them have their thing, let them do that. There's been thousands, if not millions, of those things that have led to this cultural shift. And it's okay to stand up against what may appear to be a small battle to some, to keep it from becoming this tsunami that you can't stop, because all of a sudden you're the wrong person surfing the wrong direction. Yeah, no,
applying that to comedians, though, I mean, I think every comedian's different. I mean, not every comedian wants to be a socially conscious. Their act is not about social commentary. Most comedians aren't. Most comedians just want to be funny. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Want to be funny to a broad group of people. I think there are different places you can say more. I found comedy's limiting, because the more you try to do social commentary as a comedian, the smaller your audience gets,
right?
In terms of laughter, even, because again, it's not as, some people don't like that kind of humor. So you're losing those people right away. And then some of it's more thoughtful humor. So you're losing a lot of people there. So it's just not as broad as talking about, just observational stuff, or, like we got a 3.5-year-old who, just last week told Siri on his mom, and Siri, my mom's being mean to me. So he's talking to Siri, telling on us now. So I go, there's a great comedy premise. So I started, doing a bit on that last week. And that's just kind of a general, I go, and even in my comedies, like my stage comedy, I don't try to be, I'm not a socially conscious comedian in that sense. But in my novels and in Christian film, you can say much more, because the expectation is different. Like I can write a satirical novel that people can find funny and you can make a point, but people expect more of that from a novel than they do a stand-up show. Now, I think to be that socially conscious, cutting edge comedian, you really got to work hard, because I think it's harder to be funny and really speak into culture too, because if you're really speaking into culture from a place of truth, you have to tell culture things it doesn't want to hear. So, I mean, even secular comedians aren't really speaking truth to culture. I mean, give me a break. They're just mimicking what culture wants to hear.
Right.
I mean, I don't know of I get so, I'm irritated by what culture slaps itself on the back for. Like, this guy is saying, who are you offending besides, a small minority of people that won't even listen to you? The reason you're popular and the people love you is because you're saying exactly what they want to hear. You're not speaking truth to power. You're not speaking truth to culture. You're kidding yourself if you think you're doing that. And those are the kind of comedians who probably aren't listening to this show. But
Right.
I mean, give me a break if when people say that about those comedians. They're not.
Right.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be popular.
Well, I don't want to keep you too long. You've been generous with your time. I'm excited, though, for anybody that hasn't seen the film yet. I don't think we gave away too much in a spoiler aspect today. I think there's a lot to go see in this. And absolutely, whether you're a Christian or not, you'll get it. You'll see it. I think there's a lot of stuff for both. I think if you're not Christian, but you're wondering, like, how can a Christian movie be funny? This is a great one to start with.
I hope it. So churchpeoplefilm.com, you can actually see the trailer there. And the folks at Collide Media put the trailer together, and man, they did such a great job. I mean, I don't know how it's like, I'll channel surf a lot. Well, not really channel surf, but I'll go to iMovie and I'll look for a movie to watch, and I'll sit there and watch 30 minutes worth of trailers before I decide to watch something. And then it's like, I'm not going to watch anything now, but I watch a lot of trailers, and I will say this holds up to any trailer I've seen. They really did a great job and they really captured what the movie's about without giving everything away. And man, yeah, so churchpeoplefilm.com, you can see the trailer, and then it's coming out on DVD and digital September 3rd.
Right. And I believe you can sign up for an email blast to know when it's coming out and how to get it from when you go there. So, and then people can check out thorramsey.com if they want to find out more about Thor and where he's at. His books are on there. So if you want to learn more about his books, and good luck on the upcoming novel, 9 months away.
There you go.
The gestation period of a child. So I don't know if we should even announce it till after 3 months, but now we've let the cat out of the bag.
There you go. It's out of the bag now. So
Thor, it's been great catching up. It's been I guess since we did banana stuff, seen you even through this medium, but it's good catching up. I'm glad you're doing well. And if I can help get the word out on anything else, just let me know.
Thanks, Rick. Really appreciate it.
Hope you enjoyed the interview with Thor Ramsey. I know I did. Great catching up with him, and just glad that he's got different types of success. We can get pigeonholed sometime as a comedian to just doing shows, but we definitely learned last year when those shows aren't happening, what else can you do? Well, maybe you get together with 3 or 4 friends, write a screenplay. How about that? All kinds of stuff going on in Thor's life, and I'm happy for him. Hey, if you want to check out the Church People movie, go to churchpeoplefilm.com. churchpeoplefilm.com. You can watch the trailer on there. And he's right. It's a great trailer. I'm in a movie that has a trailer, and I think ours is pretty good. But man, I really liked how it kind of, especially now that I've seen Church People, how it really frames the movie up. So if you're curious about checking it out, the trailer tells you everything you need without giving anything away. And if you're a student of film and you'd like to put these trailers together for your own projects, it's worth checking out. They really did a good job, as he said. You can find out more about Thor at thorramsey.com. It's THORRAMSEY.com. And again, the movie comes out September 3rd on digital and DVD. Support Thor. Support good programming. And hopefully there'll be more of it. I know he's working on a couple things right now. Again, thanks to Rhonda Corey for sponsoring the episode. I was about to say supporting, but sponsoring is the same. So I'm going to combine those two words and say sponsoring, sponsor. I don't even know what I'm saying now. It's late. I got to get this thing done so I can give it to you. So I'm out. You guys stay safe out there and stay funny.
Thanks for listening to the School of Laughs podcast. If you'd like to hear more School of Laughs podcasts, you can find them on iTunes and Stitcher.com. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. For information on upcoming live and online classes, visit schooloflaughs.com. Until next time, stay tuned, stay focused, and stay funny.